Today we're talking about this horrifying self-torture device and the strange history behind it. Let's get it started. If you were a man living in the Victorian era, your doctor probably would have given you one of these. The diagnosis would have been spermatorrhea, and this is an anti-self-pleasure device. See, in the early 19th century, doctors really believed that self-pleasure would lead to mental illness and even death. Invented more than 140 years ago, these items were called juggums. Men would attach these items to their member, and when they were feeling excited, something down there would begin to happen. But the sharp metal points would dig into the skin, causing excruciating pain, making you lose that feeling. Now, we don't know how many men actually used these, and at the end of the 19th century, they questioned if spermatorrhea was actually even a thing. And finally, science proved that self-pleasure would not kill you, and men were grateful.
Craziest torture devices ever, Part 51. The Graduated Electronic Decelerator, also known as the GED. This was made to produce a powerful electric skin shock, invented by this man, Matthew Israel, in the early 90s. Used at the Judge Rottenberg Educational Center. Used as part of the school's behavioral program, known for causing both physical and psychological harm. Some being tissue damage, burns, fear, aggression. This drawing was actually done by an undisclosed student at the school. You may think electroshock therapy was a thing of the past. This is the third device to ever be banned by the FDA, and that didn't happen until 2020. And yes, I will be covering that entire school in a video. Fuck that.
Torture methods. Part 13. The lead sprinkler. The lead sprinkler was a torture device often used to shower victims with molten lead, boiling oil, boiling water, tar or acid. Variations of this torture method included pouring molten metal in victims' mouth, anus, or vagina, causing great deal of pain, serious inner burns, and eventual death. In Mongol Empire, the worst criminals were sometimes punished by pouring molten silver to their eyes.
The craziest torture devices ever, Part 48. The Chinese Death Cage. This is actually a later variant of the Kang. This one was also used on prisoners but wasn't seen until the late 1800s. You would be placed inside of the cage with only your neck suspending your body. Under your feet was a pile of thin stones or wooden planks. Every day one would be removed until your neck either snapped from the weight of your body or you were slowly strangled to death. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, Part 50. The Medieval Chastity Belt. Debatable if this was a torture device, but let's talk about it anyway. These came into common use around the 16th century all around Europe, used to preserve chastity, protect women, and dissuade any temptation. I mean, what they did kinda speaks for itself. They were notorious for causing harm to those who wore them. Infection, abrasive wounds, sepsis, and even death were very common. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, Part 26. Crocodile shears. This one's for the boys. Only used on someone who tried to assassinate the king. A simple set of pincers with a long narrow tube. Lining the tube was razor sharp spikes, usually heated up red hot before use. Sometimes used on fingers, but mainly used on your glizzy. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, Part 49. The Witch's Chair. Highly used in the 18th century. Used to torture and interrogate those suspected of witchcraft. Clearly inspired by the medieval European iron chair. After you were strapped in, they would use metal bars to push the spikes into your skin. Some special variants like this one had spikes on the headrest, which would be used to deliver a devastating death. Fuck that. The craziest torture devices ever, Part 13. Ah yes, the brutal saw torture. Popular in Middle Age Europe, but used worldwide. The method showed behind me is actually the classic style of saw torture. It would string you upside down by your ankles so the blood flow would go right to your brain, keeping you alive until they hit your midsection. The ancient Chinese had their own way of doing it. They went from the head down. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, Part 61. The rack. This one can be traced back all the way to Emperor Nero, but widespread use began in the Middle Ages. You would be placed on the rack with ropes around your arms and legs. The torturer would then begin to wind in the rope, slowly dislocating your arms and legs. Those that were more uncooperative would suffer the fate of having their limbs tore right off. Imagine how slow and agonizing that must have been. Fuck that.
Welcome back, you guys. Today we're looking at more of the worst torture devices in history. Let's get it started. At number 3, we've got the tongue terror. For this torture, the victim would be forced down and their mouth would be pried open. The razor blade shears would be clamped onto the victim's tongue. The screw handle would then slowly be twisted effortlessly, slicing off the victim's tongue. At number 2, we've got the instep borer. This 15th century German device resembled a boot made of iron. It was hinged to allow the foot to be tightly placed inside. On top of the boot was a hand crank that would be slowly turned, sending a large, sharp knife into the person's foot. The hole in the victim's foot was usually so big that they would die of blood loss or infection. And at number 1, we've got the scavenger's daughter. This A-frame piece of metal was designed to do the exact opposite of the rack. Instead of spreading the victim's body, it would compress the victim's body to the ultimate limit. The victim's head would be forced into the top, the arms in the middle, and the legs at the bottom. Over the time, the victim would slowly be crushed.
Craziest torture devices ever, Part 34. Pharaoh cuffs. Currently in use by the Eritrea government and police. Eritrea is an East African country, and they are currently under investigation by the Human Rights Commission. Due to their discretion and their strict government, there aren't actually any pictures of the devices. These are special iron cuffs used during interrogations, with bolts attached to them to tighten them from underneath. The iron would dig into your flesh and cause severe pain and stop the blood flow, either tightened or loosened depending on the answer you give. Victims describe it as severe pain, swelling, numbness, and even temporary paralysis. One victim suffered 6 months of hand paralysis. Fuck that. Craziest torture devices ever, Part 60. The Whirligig. By far the strangest device I've ever come across. It was literally just a 6-foot tall cylindrical cage, used by the British Army in the late 1700s as a form of punishment. What was once a punishment is now something we voluntarily do. They would violently spin you around, sometimes for up to 3 whole days. Obviously not fatal, but puking was inevitable. Personally, I would hate this. I cannot stand being dizzy. Fuck that.
The most horrific torture methods. Part 4. Bamboo torture. This is just disturbing. If you think horticulture and torture don't gel well, you clearly haven't heard of the bamboo torture method. A restrained victim would be made to sit on a bamboo sapling. Bamboo grows really fast. In this case, the sapling would tear the anus and continue its journey inside the victim's body. Poor victim. Poor bamboo. Most horrific torture methods. Part 29. Sewn into a donkey. A donkey would be killed, its belly sliced open, and the entrails removed. The accused was then stripped of clothing and stuffed into the animal's belly. The belly was stitched closed, leaving only the accused's head outside, preventing suffocation. The donkey's body was kept in the sun. It would begin to decompose with the living victim inside being cooked by the heat. Maggots would crawl all over the accused, and vultures would pick at the animal's decaying flesh. Press the plus for more of the macabre.